Getting inside of your mind is all I want. I'm going to take complete control. Just relax. Look into my eyes, listen to my voice. Now, relax. Whatever's worrying you, I can fix it. I can help. Just relax and let me take control of your thoughts. I am sitting on a chair, and all around me I can hear only silence and one voice. I'm sure I can hear a mechanical ticking as I slowly begin to feel like I'm going to fall asleep. Whatever is worrying you, I can fix it. Welcome to Extraordinary Stories Podcast. Hey, how are you? Are you well? Are you good? I am. Just quickly, can I say, the reaction to the Belle Gibson story in the last episode has been amazing. It's been so amazing. I mean, I kind of thought that it would spark a bit of opinion because she's outrageous. So it was really good to see people debating that on, different social media platforms. But also, this is what I didn't expect. I didn't expect people who were actually really directly affected by Belle Gibson to get in touch. So thank you if you did. I had a couple of emails from people who said, I actually lived the Belle Gibson experience. Like, these are people who had cancer at the time and really believed that Belle Gibson was this incredible beacon of light and believed everything coming out of her mouth on Instagram. And they were kind of emailing me going, now I just feel like such a fool because when the whole thing was exposed, I felt like such an idiot. But I hope when I did the episode, I kind of explained how unbelievable she was in terms of getting people to believe her. So yeah, anyway, that's just that, but thank you for getting in touch. Okay, are you ready for this story? It's bonkers. This is from the Bonkers Encyclopedia of Stories. Are you ready? Okay, let's go. Three American teenagers, all victims. Marcus Freeman, Brittany Palumbo, and Wesley McKinley. These three were not friends, but they shared one thing in common. They all attended Northport High School in Florida. Florida. Have you heard of it? I'm sure you have. And I'm sure when you hear this story, you'll be able to create your own Florida style headline. Florida man, Florida woman, whatever. So let's go to 2011, when all three of these teenagers were alive and well. Let's start with Marcus Freeman, who was 16 years old and a star quarterback on the football team. Marcus was an all-round good student. Then we've got Wesley McKinley, Wesley McKinley was also 16. He was part of the school music programme. He played guitar, and he was applying and hoping to be accepted to Juilliard for his guitar playing. And then thirdly, we have Brittany Palumbo. Brittany was 17, and she was an academic. She achieved really good grades at school and generally did well. So like I said before, not friends, the only thing in common, same high school. Marcus, the sporty one. Wesley, the musician. And Brittany, the academic. I just realised I sort of sound like I'm reducing them to like the Spice Girls in the way that I'm labelling them. Hey, it's the sporty one. Hey, it's the musician. No, I don't mean that. Of course, there's so much more than just those things. But in terms of, being teenagers and having interests, that's kind of what they were. Not that is their whole identity, but that's kind of what they were into. Now, they shared one thing in common apart from going to the same high school, and that is anxiety. All three of them suffered in one way or another from a form of anxiety. In the case of Marcus, it was about his anxiety on the sports field. Like I said, he was the star quarterback, which, right, between you and me, I'm not going to lie, I'm not a big football fan, and I don't really know what a star quarterback is, right? However, I recognise that it's big. I know it's a big deal. And so Marcus was really nervous that when he went out onto the school football team, he wasn't going to live up to expectation. He wasn't going to play as well as he should. In the case of Wesley, where his anxiety was coming from is that if he wanted to achieve his dream of going to Juilliard, he would have to go through some other auditions for different music programs. They were coming up, and he was terrified. He was really scared of these auditions and failing them and not achieving getting into the school that he wanted. Now for Brittany, her anxiety was to do with the fact that she'd always achieved really good scores. She'd always done well in school, but recently some of her grades were slipping a little bit. And when I say slipping, it's not like they were bad grades, it's just that they weren't all straight A's. She was starting to just see some B's, some B minuses pop up, and this was worrying her. Now, the thing about this is, right, I was thinking, you know what it's like when you're 16 and you're 17? The pressure that you put on yourself is immense, isn't it? It's like a crazy level of pressure that you put on yourself to do well and achieve well. It's almost like, you sort of think at 16 and 17, oh, if I don't get an A on that test, that's it. The whole of my life is going to fall apart. Well, I say teenage, but, and adults, everyone just puts far too much pressure on themselves. So, take it easy, everyone. You're doing an amazing job. Whatever you're doing well, okay? It's just my little motivational speech. But in that way, I feel that we can all identify with Wesley, Marcus, Brittany. You get that. So they each decide individually they are going to try and get some help from the school system for their individual cases of nerves and stress. And so they go to their school principal, a Mr. George Kenny. George Kenny had been the principal for a few years at Northport High School. And well, George was well respected. He was also thought of as a little bit off the wall. People found him a little bit odd sometimes, but he might have his little quirks, he might have his odd ways of being, okay? We've all got our different things. Generally, he was thought of as quite a good principal. Now, all three of these teenagers will go to him individually for advice, and all three of them will end up dead. And is George Kenny to blame? Marcus Freeman, the sporty one, was at a dentist appointment in March with the upcoming sports season ahead of him, and he was in the car with his girlfriend. Now, he'd gone to the dentist that day, and it was a routine appointment. It was nothing major, nothing to worry about. So his girlfriend's gone with him, she's waited in the waiting room. Fine. He has his routine appointment, gets in the car, and they're driving home. Now, about halfway through the journey, something strange happens. The 16-year-old will get a weird look across his face, as if he's somehow in a trance. And his girlfriend is really panicked in the car. She's completely unsure of what's happening. She's thinking, is he having a seizure? Is it a reaction to something from the dentist? Or is it something else? Like, what's happening here? Minutes later, with the same dazed look on his face, Marcus loses complete control of the car. And his girlfriend describes it as he just stopped driving. And the car, with the two of them inside, drives off the road, smashes into a tree, killing Marcus instantly. His dead body sits in the driver's seat, while his badly injured girlfriend, who has received a really bad head injury, gets free of the car and she runs for help. But it's too late to save Marcus, and his dead body has to be cut out of the car. 2 weeks later, Wesley McKinley, the guitar player, was, according to friends, acting strangely at school. He was quiet and he was withdrawn. And this wasn't normal, and his friends did say, this is like weird behaviour from him. He always seemed to be quite upbeat, quite happy. They'd never known him to have any kind of depression, but here he was being really quiet. They said that he was in some sort of daze, and it was like he couldn't be brought back out of it. So on an average school day, the day ends, he gets on the school bus to go home with his friends. He gets off, and one of his friends says to him, "Are you okay? Like, what's wrong?" And Wesley McKinley says, "I feel like I need you to punch me in the face to wake me up." He actually asks his friend, "Will you do it? Will you punch me in the face to see if it wakes me up?" And his friend says, "No. Maybe you're just tired. Maybe you just need to go home and go to bed." But he can't shake this dazed feeling that he's in. 2 hours later, Wesley's parents will arrive home to find that their 16-year-old son has hung himself in the backyard from a large tree. He's gotten rope from the garage, and he's chosen a tree that's out of view from the neighbours, and his dead body hangs there. 3 days after this, Brittany Palumbo, the academic, she's at home with her family, and her mum and dad pick up that she's a little bit upset. And they do a bit of questioning and a bit of digging to find out what's going on with Brittany. She reveals to them that she hasn't quite got the scores in the latest tests at school that she wanted, and that she's disappointed in herself. And her parents say to her, look, Brittany, try not to be so hard on yourself. Try to relax. They don't really think this advice is going in. She still looks a bit upset, a bit anxious. So she goes to bed. And the following morning when they go to wake her, Brittany's bed is empty. They look around. Any signs? Where could she have gone? Did she leave really early for school? They open her bedroom closet, and inside the closet, the 17-year-old has hung herself. She's tied rope around her neck and hung herself in the middle of the night. Awful. Horrendous. In the space of a month, 3 students from this same school are dead. And one thing connects them. The school principal, George Kenny. George Kenny was, at best, an amateur when it came to hypnosis. Yet he practiced it like an expert. He would regularly gather together his staff at lunchtimes, sometimes after school, and he would perform hypnosis on them, trying to, and I'm quoting here, relax them. George Kenny loved, and I mean loved, his hypnosis, and he loved to hypnotise his students, especially those who showed anything like anxiety. So when these 3 students had individually gone to their principal for help, he had jumped at the chance to hypnotise them and get rid of their anxiety. In the weeks that followed their deaths, the parents of Marcus, Wesley, Brittany got together, compared notes, and it led them to one thing. Somehow George was responsible, they thought, for the death of their children. Now, was this the first time that hypnosis had ever come up with George? No, it was not. 3 separate complaints had been made to the Sarasota School Board about George Kenny. Now these complaints, let's look at them, shall we? Firstly, 2 teachers who worked at the school had called the authorities months and months before this, because they objected to his lunchtime and after school hypnosis sessions. They thought their boss was a fraud, a man who claimed to know what hypnosis was all about, but in fact was a charlatan. The third complaint came from a parent who noticed that her 16-year-old son was acting very strangely after a school trip. Okay, this school trip then, let's talk about this. Well, this had been a school trip to Ohio, and George Kenny was the man in charge. He took the students, and over the weekend when they were away in Ohio, he performed hypnosis on the pupils. One of them recalls after the session he felt so odd, so out of it. He was struggling to think, he couldn't gather his thoughts. It was like his thoughts had been clouded by a sort of fog. He would say, I was in a trance. I wasn't able to find my room in the hotel in Ohio because all the numbers had changed to Chinese. I was lost for about 20 to 25 minutes just walking around, and all I was seeing was Chinese lettering. That is some bad fucking hypnosis. Oh my god. One of the other students who was interviewed about this weird weekend that they were away on said, oh yeah, Principal Kenny would do weird things, like he would do hypnosis and he would make some of the guys do things like put lipstick on, because you know, everybody thinks it's really funny when teenage boys put lipstick on. The fuck is this guy on? What? Oh my god. Now, when the parents complained to the school board that basically their kids had gone on this trip and he'd been hypnotising them, George Kenney was told, you must stop this now. Stop whatever you're doing with hypnosis. Stop it. Just cut it right out. Did he stop? No, he didn't. And that's why he's arrested in connection with the deaths of Marcus, Wesley and Brittany. Because police believe, at this point, he's done something irreversible to their brains and caused their deaths. He's suspended from the school and an investigation begins. Look, here is the thing, right? Consider this a public bloody warning. If your boss ever says, I'd like to see you all at lunchtime because I'm going to do a hypnosis session, then you just run. You run, you find an adult and you hide. No, you don't. You tell the adult what's going on and then you hide. And then you phone the police. Because no way should this man be performing hypnosis. No way should anybody be performing hypnosis on their staff and on their pupils. Get out of my face with this. Like, what's going on here? What is hypnosis? Right, well, we've all got a kind of understanding of it. So, it's a process of focusing the brain's attention, reducing down peripheral awareness so that the brain can focus on just something very specific, and that's usually one voice, and that one voice can suggest things and the brain listens to that more clearly because all of the peripheral noise has gone. So all the sensory things that our brain's always taking in all the time, that dulls down, and we tend to get, when hypnotised, drawn in to one thing. I've never been hypnotised, by the way, so I don't know. This is just what I've found out about hypnotism. Now, obviously we know there's loads of variants of it, so you get your stage hypnosis, you know, your shows such as the lipstick business, the hilarity that is like getting men to put on women's clothing, fuck's sake. Then you get, you know, your hypnosis for things like stopping smoking, anxiety, the kind that George is using. But it really is a process of altering the sort of state of awareness of someone's brain. Also, we know that it, you know, less so now, but it did used to get used a lot in criminal cases. You know, they would use it to try and help victims recall details that their brain might have, you know, shut out. So this kind of idea that you were traumatised and so your brain couldn't quite process all the details, but hypnosis might help bring that out. I think this description helps to kind of get a grip on it. The hypnotised individual appears to heed only the communications of the hypnotist and typically responds in an uncritical, automatic fashion, whilst ignoring all aspects of the environment other than those pointed out by the hypnotist. In a hypnotic state, an individual tends to see, feel, smell, and otherwise perceive in accordance with only the hypnotist's suggestions. The effects of hypnosis are not limited, but rely on sensory change. Even the person who's being hypnotized's memory can be altered. It's pretty scary. And what's the most kind of dangerous thing about it, and this is why scientists tend to hate hypnosis, is that it's unsafe when it's to do with how deep the hypnosis is. And what I mean by that is it's like a sliding scale. So you can kind of put someone into like a sleepy, relaxed state with your voice. The old watch in front of your eyes, follow my eye, follow the watch, or look into my eyes, all that sort of stuff to help relax the brain. But it is so dangerous. You put someone in that and you don't bring them out of it properly. That is horrendous. Now, was George Kenny a properly trained hypnotist? Had he gone to the International University of Hypnosis? No, he bloody hadn't. He'd done a bit of training. A very surface level of training, but yet thought himself an expert. Some of the characteristics of hypnosis include things like disassociation, age regression, amnesia, time distortion, release of inhibitions, effortless imagination, change in pain threshold. Is that the kind of thing you should be dicking about with? I don't think so. Unless you are an absolute expert, do not waste my time or anybody's time dicking about with something you don't know everything about. Oh my God. I just don't. I'm not saying I'm against hypnotism, right? I just don't know enough about it. One of my friends went to see Derek Brown. The big, huge UK hypnotist. I think he might be the kind of biggest one, right? This is the weirdest thing. She bought her tickets, went along, dead excited because she was like, oh my God, I totally love the hypnotism and all that. She fell asleep within the first 5 minutes of the show and then woke up at the end. Here's the weirdest bit. She didn't think that was odd. She was like, oh, I went to this hypnotist show and I fell asleep for the whole thing. I was like, I'm sorry, what? You fell asleep at a hypnotist show and you didn't think that was weird? What an absolute bollocksing waste of money, but also at a hypnotist show. Creepy. I think that's odd. Anyway, I'm saying nothing. George Kenny had been invited to Northport High School in Florida because its overall figures on yearly school results were pretty poor. And what they needed a maverick. They needed a man who could turn those figures around. And the school board believed George to be that man. It was as soon as he arrived at the school that he began his hypnosis with teachers and with students. Now, within a year of him being there, the school pass rates, the numbers, the all-important figures that he had to get, they shot up through the roof. The school board were delighted because they were seeing a massive upturn in these figures. And this is what George was saying. It's because of my hypnosis. It's because I'm hypnotising them. That's why. So George Kenny is arrested, as I said, in connection with the 3 deaths. He's charged with practising without a licence. He is summoned to court to explain himself. And there begins a division in opinion about George. Protests begin at the school in his absence. A really large contingent of pupils and staff who believe him to be this brilliant principal. They make signs which read, "Bring back Mr. Kenny. Principal Kenny not to blame." Or one of the more tasteless signs, "Kenny can hypnotise me anytime." That's awful. 3 students have just died and someone's walking about with that sign. I'd have taken it out of their hand, ripped it up and made them eat it. On the opposite side of that support, You've got parents, you've got pupils who want him permanently removed, arrested and jailed for his actions. Inside court, those who want to see him go to prison say, probably the worst loss that can happen to a parent is to lose a child, especially needlessly, because you have someone who's decided to perform a medical service on kids without a license. He altered the underdeveloped brains of these 3 teenagers, and they all ended up dead because of it. This is what George has to say in court. I don't think I was unreasonable. I took steps to get trained at an appropriate level. I could have performed it in private, but I chose to do for those kids what I needed to do because they came to me for help. They were anxious and I helped them. That statement is absolute madness. He's saying, I helped them. All 3 of them are dead. Now, when he says in court, I took steps to get trained, this is probed a bit further. What are these steps that you took to train as a hypnotist? George admits he took an online course. Oh, for fuck's sake. George, mate, I could take an online course right now in open heart surgery. You wouldn't want me fiddling about with your valves if you collapsed. Come on, man. What do you want me performing open heart surgery saying, don't worry, I learned it on Zoom? Oh my God. Where this gets a little bit more complex in court when they start pulling it apart is that Marcus Freeman, the one who died in the car, his mother is in court demanding that some kind of justice for her son happens because she believes that her son went into a daze in that car and drove off the road because his brain had somehow been altered. The difficulty is, Marcus had brought home a piece of paper from school from George Kenney asking permission for him to perform hypnotism on her son, and she had signed it. So she had actually said yes to this. This makes it difficult. On the car thing, his lawyers will say he was driving in this supposed hypnotised state that his girlfriend says he was in. I just don't think you go about driving in that state, do you? Hypnosis experts are brought into court and they will say sometimes when you've been hypnotised, it doesn't mean that your brain goes into that state and stays in it. It can fluctuate. It can come back depending on how badly it's been done by George Kenney. It means that, yeah, it's possible that the teenagers were going in and out of a dazed state. So it's perfectly possible that he was fine the day he went to the dentist. But in that car, that's when the daze came over him. As a defence, it's put forward that perhaps this has nothing to do with George Kenney, and that actually what he did with them individually in his office was perfectly above board, and that all 3 of them tried self-hypnosis. Perhaps they thought that they could, go home, try on themselves what the principal had shown them in that office. This is just a theory that the defence have. As the court case rages on, the protests get bigger and bigger. And the parents of the dead children will say the worst thing about this is that he never apologised. He still hasn't to this day said sorry. Never once has he admitted any wrongdoing. We just want an apology. An apology comes to the parents from the school board, but it's not what they want. They want it from George. So as the school puts into place a new principal who swears he will not try any hypnosis, the case against George comes to an end, and really all that happens is he gets a slap on the wrist in terms of criminal behaviour. He's told not to do it again. Don't practice this without a proper licence. The school board, they remove him from any form of teaching, and this is gutting for the parents. He's given a retirement package. He's given a whack of money, and he disappears off to a quiet part of Florida, buys a new house, and he lives a quiet life away from the spotlight. The parents of Marcus, Wesley and Brittany each receive $200,000 in compensation, but they say it's not enough. Their official statement says, "We hope the school board will change the way it operates to prevent these types of tragedies from occurring in the future. We will move forward with the hope that our children's legacy will be that the school board must put children's physical and mental welfare first and foremost." A counter argument to all of this is that perhaps these three teenagers were suffering so badly from anxiety that suicide seemed like the only option, and that hypnosis or no hypnosis, they would have killed themselves anyway. Of course, where that starts to cause difficult questions is, by that logic, you're saying that a 16-year-old driving back from the dentist one day in a car chose to kill himself knowing that his girlfriend sitting in the passenger seat would also die. You're saying that a 17-year-old who moments beforehand said to his friends, "Can you punch me in the face because I'm in a daze and I can't come out of it," was in such a daze that he hung himself from a tree. And that a girl whose grades slipped was so upset that she hung herself in her closet, and that hypnosis had nothing to do with it. It would always have been that way. It's just an idea, just a theory. Once the dust has settled, the school continues with its large public sporting events, and there is a memorial, a huge memorial for 3 dead teenagers. A memorial that George Kenney was not invited to. And so ends the story. I'm really keen to know your thoughts on this one. Really keen to hear what you think. Like I said in that episode, I'm not down on hypnosis. I don't know enough about it. I think it kind of freaks me out because I don't know enough about it, because I'm like, it's messing with someone's brain. And I think that's odd. I think when you can go into someone's mind and start doing things like that, like age regression, and in actual fact, even the sort of criminal case bit of it's always freaked me out whenever I hear a story and it's like, and they took the victim and they made them go through hypnosis to try and recall the details. I always think that's a bit dodgy. Our brains regulate things for a reason, because we can't cope with certain things, and I don't think someone should be allowed to just go in and meddle with your thinking. But anyway, those are just my thoughts. Let me know what you think. Have you been hypnotised? I'd love to actually hear if you have, if you've been hypnotised. If you had, maybe you had a dead positive experience. Maybe you were someone who got up on stage and put on women's clothing or put on lipstick. Maybe you got naked and ran about. I don't know what you did. If you got hypnotised, please get in touch. Tell me your hypnosis story because I would love to hear it. Okay, I'm out of here. You know where to get me. Get in touch. Okay. Goodbye.
It didn't affect me really one way or the other. I would imagine from the look on his face, let's get it on, let's do it, let's get it over. Let's get it on, let's do it, let's get it over.